So those were some things that I saw that Joseph learned. Is there anybody can think of anything else that maybe Joseph, anything in your own mind that you might see that Joseph picked up on while he was there? I believe he learned optimism. Now, it might sound strange, but I believe he learned that since God, he learned that God was in control of everything, and of his life certainly, and that he brought him down there and also took him out. But I believe he learned optimism through that he learned not to let yesterday's difficulties and problems that he had to obscure or blind him to blessings that God has today. So he learned that no matter what happens yesterday, always keep your mind such that God can show you the blessing he has for you today.
My Lord.
Hallelujah.
Thank you, Jesus.
Well, that's about it there that I had to learn.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus.
But anyhow, we know that God is in control of all of our lives. Everything that we know that God follows his own advice. In the scriptures, he tells us that what man, before he began building, doesn't sit down, think it through, and count all the cost involved. Mm-hmm. So I believe that when God was laying all this out in everybody's life, that's exactly what he did. He looked down through time and he saw everything that was going to happen. His foreknowledge told him what decisions every individual would make, and the result of that decision. And like we were talking about Judas, I don't believe that God predestined Judas to do that. Even though it was written in scriptures from the beginning of time that this was going to happen, it was not such that Judas would be forced to do what he did. Okay? But that Judas, those scriptures were written because God knew that Judas would do what he did. There's a difference. That God's foreknowledge allows him to write things, convey things that's going to happen. It doesn't mean he makes people make the choices that they make. It's up to us, the kind of choices we choose. Whatever we choose is our own minds doing. Okay? God doesn't force us to do these things. But because he has this foreknowledge, he was able to write down in scriptures that there would be one like Judas that would do just that. So our lives are in his control. So no matter what we get into, what we find ourselves, what situation we find ourselves in, we have to learn, like the apostle was telling us, that count it all joy. And all things work for good for them that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And that can be said because Jesus is in control. Sure. Some people, I think, have the idea that there's this, while we are involved in a spiritual conflict, us, okay, there is no real contest between God and Satan. Satan is a created being. He's an angel, fallen angel, but he is a created being. Mm-hmm. He is not God's opposite. He is not omnipresent. He is not omnipowerful. Okay? There is no contest between God and Satan. God is in control of everything. He allows Satan to occupy this world, this creation, for a purpose. We've studied the last few weeks about how God created all this. He created the evil principalities and powers. He did all this for a purpose, and that purpose was to give us our training ground. Okay? This is where we learn to be what he wants us to be. And to do that, all these things that cause conflicts had to be there. So when you're going through these things, I remember thinking, well, why did God let this happen? Why did he allow Satan to do this? Well, there is a purpose in everything that he does. Yes. Everything that he does. Everything that he allows to happen in our life is a purpose. It is not that Satan has got the upper hand at any particular time in your life. It's God's way of training, teaching, preparing, perfecting us. Okay? if you look in Ephesians, and he gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the perfecting of the saints. So everything that occurs in your life is for the purpose that God has preordained to bring you to where he wants you to be. And we just have somehow, much like Joseph did, we have to learn Abraham and David and Moses. We have to learn to trust him, even when sometimes it may require us to go to school away from our family. They all did it. Moses had to go. Moses went to the back of the desert, and spent 40 years, and we all know the stories of David's. So if we look at them as examples, we shouldn't think it too strange that difficulties occur in our life that challenge us. And sometimes, for God to achieve what he wants to achieve with our lives, we have to face those alone. Because if you think about the fact that, well, if I live next door to my dad, I can just run next door and say, well, Dad, I'm a little short this week. I don't have a job or whatever. Can you offer me some money? It'd be kind of hard for God to teach me to trust him and lean only on him under those conditions. Right. Sometimes God has to get you away where he can have you to himself, so to speak. And if you're going to be dependent on anybody, it's going to only be him.
Praise
so
God.
Sometimes things happen in your life. Try to remember that.
Yes.
It's all for a purpose. It's all for a purpose.
Jesus.
Anyone have any comments or anything else you want to share about Joseph or Moses or Abraham, or maybe in your own life?
I think the reason why a lot of people mess up is they react at the time, whatever the situation is. They don't stop and think what the outcome is going to be or how it's going to affect them.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people make some mistake.
It's messed up.
I know I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have too, brother. I guess that's part of our learning lesson too.
Right.
Learning to try to stop and think about things before we act too quickly, maybe. So, I just think that it's wonderful that God cares enough about us that he has chosen us to be involved in his plan.
Yes.
Amen.
Because he didn't have to, but he did. We are part of his plan, and the Bible tells us that he chastens whom he loves, scourges whom he receiveth. So, when these things happen, and the apostle said, think it not strange when these fiery darts come at you in life, it's just part of God's way of getting us to where he wants us to be. If we can kind of get a handle on that no matter what happens in our life, that it's not Satan getting the upper hand of us or the upper hand of God. It's actually God trying to teach and train us what he wants us to know.
Yeah.
And therefore, we should be able to count it all joy, because it is part of our schooling that God has put us here for. And it's all going to turn out exactly the way he wants it. So, any other comments tonight?
I like what you brought out about, if you live just close to your family, and you just always run over there and get what you need.
Yeah.
And then when you're not close to them, you have to call on God. So I remember when I was in Germany, and I had no family there, I had to cry out to God, because I had both those girls then, and just me and them babies, and you learn to lean on God.
Yeah.
Lean on God.
If you've got everything you need in life, I know Bob talked about, you look at the well-to-do in life, Hollywood and all those, they have just about anything you can think of, the fame, the fortune, the money. They don't realize, they have no need for God. There's,
Right.
and it's like when we're young, kind of like babes on milk, we don't fully